Hello and welcome to this edition of Dr. Clark's 101, The Living Classroom. And today we're talking politics 101 with my good friend and colleague, Professor George Embody. And Professor Embody, greetings and welcome, my friend. How you been?
Greetings, greetings. Good to see you. We weren't here and on the first Wednesday because of New Year's, but I'm glad you decided we needed to catch up on what's going on.
Absolutely. And and the thing about Professor Embody, eminent professor and endowed professor at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Southern University in New Orleans, and Professor Embody, man, it is so much that's taking place, so much that's on the plate of the average Americans. And the thing about it is that we've got to address a number of issues that really require some attention. And I want to talk first and remember the victims that from the terrorist attack here in the city of New Orleans that took place in the French Quarter on New Year's, and we take a moment to remember them. And I want you to for you to give our audience your professional analysis, and I'll do some follow up as well. And I'd like to get your professional analysis as a political scientist. What do you think of the nature of this attack that took place in the French Quarter? Yes,
Well,
sir.
first, I want to say there, I want prayers and condolences to the families that lost their loved ones, and then to so many of them that were hurt as a result of this attack. And it was to all of us a surprise attack. And I don't know. Well, we know that the perpetrator looked at New Orleans apparently as a soft target. Uh, Many more people in New York, many more people in Chicago, many more people, but that person saw New Orleans, which is, having not only New Year's celebration, Super Bowl, Mardi Gras, so have the events of a big city, but was viewed in the context of looking for vulnerabilities in our shield to protect the citizens. And let me just say this, that had it not been for the response of the NOPD, first responders, this attack would have been worse, way worse. So not to take lightly the 14 lives that were taken away, or the 30 or so that were injured, it's still hats off to our first responders, our NOPD, for at least keeping it within those numbers.
Absolutely, because it certainly could have been. It certainly could have been worse, to say the least. And what strikes to me is that we need to pay particular attention to the fact that we do have homegrown domestic terrorists here in the state, here in the United States. So it's not just international terrorists that we need to be concerned about, or individuals who are prone to these sort of attacks, but individuals who are domestic. Yes, sir.
And, we've kind of denied that for quite some time because
Yes.
of our prejudices and our marginalization of certain peoples. So we have been damaged and not benefit from the fact of dealing with the reality of the data that shows that the domestic terrorist apparatus is perhaps or definitely worse than the foreign terrorists.
And they're highly trained.
Highly trained.
They live in silos, and the domestic terrorists tend not to be people of color when it's all
Absolutely.
said and done.
Absolutely.
And so, but it was almost as if for decades they have been given a degree of cover, and still are receiving some cover.
Yeah, and once again, it has to do with our wanting to emphasize certain people as being bad guys, not looking at the objective data of, for example, the racist organizations which are involved in domestic terrorism, and that have grown over the past 4 to 6 years, and not looking at the methods by which our citizens become socialized into terrorist activities.
And individuals who are militarily trained,
Absolutely.
gone to the military, come
Absolutely.
out knowledgeable. Yeah, and I say to individuals all the time is that in the United States, we don't have civics anymore. There's no degree of real political socialization. But what happens is that once individuals now are becoming part of once they go through the system, and when I say individuals, citizens go through the system, and they see much of the disparities that exist in society. When you have 400 million people, you're going to know that there are going to be some individuals who are going to act out upon that, because regardless of their economic strata, but there are some who may see some philosophical connection to the marginalization that you speak about.
Absolutely.
And we cannot escape it. And so my contention and belief is that when Langston Hughes was, and others have written that say when the Negro wakes up, when the black man wakes up, there may be hell to pay in America.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
so we got to understand that that when we begin to, and you begin to cut programs, cut activities, and you see much of the abuse that's taking place in our society against people of color, what's going to happen when not individuals act up in lone wolves as they say, but what happens when they decide to form real structural linkages with individuals who do mean harm to American society? And that's something we have to pay particular attention to.
Yeah, I just think
Yes,
that
sir.
our federal government, all the governments, have to become a little more sophisticated and have mechanisms for identifying. We see now after the fact that there were some things out there that should have been picked up on this guy and others, but we have to develop more of a sophistication on how to identify potential terrorist threats.
And
I mean, he had an
yes.
ISIS flag on the car. I mean, that was
an indicator.
clearly a sign.
I know for my purposes, flags represent symbolic speech. And so you see, when I see an ISIS flag, you think ISIS. We see someone carrying, and someone they may say, well, he may be or may not be attached. Well, look at this. When I see the Confederate flag, I know what you're saying to me.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
so now I understand specifically where your leanings and proclivities are.
Uh-huh.
But there's so much that we need to get to. Let's move forward and talk on a national level, in particular about what's taking place this week. I want to talk about Jimmy Carter and his funeral, his services, and we all remember the Carter administration. And if you can give us some recollection of the Carter administration from a political scientist.
Well, from a
perspective, yes,
political
sir.
science standpoint, Jimmy Carter will go down in history, perhaps as the most humane and people-oriented president, and define, in my estimation, the post-president career, because a lot of things he did from his heart while he was president, but there were just some forces that he ran up against, both in terms of inflation, both in terms of other economic and world affairs that did not leave, when he left office, did not have a stellar kind of bio with respect to being president, but showed the fact of really the kind of person he was in terms of getting involved, not just nationally, but globally, in helping people around the world, whether it was to assure free and fair elections, whether it was to help with respect to building and helping communities, and whether it was advocating for the disadvantaged and the poor. There has not been a president that caliber of a Jimmy Carter, and he should and has been fully recognized for his contributions, Habitat for Humanity,
Yes.
and all of the other things. But once again, both domestically and globally, you have to give him the highest points among presidents.
Right, and with right, as you mentioned earlier, his human rights
Human
program
rights.
and activities, and we can recall as well that up to that point he had the highest number of judges appointed under his administration of color, black judges, the highest number of women appointed to positions of power
And
and
of course,
influence.
he made
Yes,
the
sir.
move of appointing Andy Young,
Yeah.
his U.S. ambassador. That was
Son of
major.
the South, son of New Orleans.
Son of South, and there were
Yeah.
many who opposed that, but once again, that showed the kind of person he was to take someone from the civil rights community, a high-profile person from the civil rights community, and appoint him to a internationally important position.
And in fact, he elevated the position of the United Nations,
Absolutely.
Andrew Young, and in particular, he elevated the continent of Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
And so that was definitely, to President Carter's tribute. On the other hand, like John McCain, who at times showed his humanity and his sensitivity, we see this current president beating Jimmy Carter in the ground in terms of the things that he did with respect to Panama and respect to many other things, calling him weak, calling him this. And this is at a time, it amazes me how he can do these things at a time when these people are being funeralized. It just shows a lack of humanity or sensitivity on the part of this current president.
Well, that's a good president-elect. You're right, and this is a good segue to this. We see many of the pronouncements which are given to Donald Trump in terms of where he was, and we've seen them exist. You can itemize each one. Let's not even go through the appointments and recommendations that he's making before the Senate, but you can look at making Canada a state,
51st state. Yeah. Season the Panama Canal.
We're going back to the Panama Canal, but and Greenland.
Yes.
Taking over and purchasing Greenland. But his argument is that we can do it through economics, or it could be done through treaty, or it could be done through force. His argument is that this is a vital interest to the United States that Canada should, and I say his, I mean Trump's argument is that Canada is a vital interest to the United States, just as the Panama Canal. Let's look at this. Canada.
Well,
yes, sir.
This is
because it's a border state, or what? Yes, sir. Talk to what?
I you have to contrast
yes, sir.
those recommendations with his position on the Israeli Hamas peace, but more so, what does it mean? You got to contrast it with Taiwan, Ukraine, Singapore. In other words, we know that when it comes to foreign policy, the name of the game is self-interest. There's no democratic outlook when it comes to global and international affairs. It's about geopolitical self-interest. And that's always been the case in the United States, except that the kinds of things that he's uttering publicly, you would not have had recent presidents to utter them like that. So I liken it to going back to the Monroe Doctrine, Teddy Roosevelt, Manifest Destiny,
yes.
Imperialism. Now, there's two ways that you can look at it. Either he's, you got to watch Donald Trump because he's smart to the extent that in terms of negotiation, he's going to always offer the worst case scenario. And then he settles on a position that he considers to be a better position.
So you see this as the bargaining chip.
Could be saber rattling and could be a bargaining chip. On the other hand, because, realistically speaking, the things that he's talking about doing, and I quote Trudeau, he doesn't have a snowball chance in hell of Canada becoming the 51st. But once again, even let's look at what happened even with the speaker. Initially, Mike Johnson was not his choice, but it became inevitable that he would not be able to get the person that he wanted to. So what does he do? He steps back and he endorses Mike Johnson. So we see that
to appear to be the winners. To
pretty
come out
well.
on the
So
winning
yes,
side. Yes.
so I do think that many of the things, even in terms of the things he's saying about NATO and the like, many of those are positions that he take so he can get a better deal. But on the other hand, it could backfire in terms of the hostilities that people around the world will have for the United States in our hemisphere and also in Europe and on the continent of Africa, everywhere. And, so he may be going a little too far.
It goes back to the whole concept of the ugly American that
Absolutely.
exists, that was written years
Absolutely.
ago. But if you're Canadian, and I have good friends in Canada, if you're from Panama, Panamanian, and I have good friends in Panama, can you imagine the how you would begin to think politically and what you must do to protect yourself and what the leadership must begin to do? Should they form allies of individuals who are not for you or who are not friendly to the United States? Or what should they do? Because at a certain point, it's about the rational self-interest of these other nation states as well.
That's that.
Yes, sir.
Well, you take, for example, his position on Panama. He claims that Panama has turned over control of the Panama Canal to China. And so in that regard, he's saying that, that they owe us a debt for us building it, and we're not going to let
and
that
there's no
happen.
fact checking now on social media. So it takes people like yourself and others who are professionals to go out and to study and to look at it and then to bring the truth. But how many individuals are going to come through these sort of mediums or whatever to find the truth? Yes,
well,
sir.
we know that this president is prone to hyperbole, prone to hyper exaggerations of situations. So it's never the way that he expresses it. But once again, from a strategy standpoint, he just uses it as leverage. For example, also changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. I mean,
yeah. and you can go. They talk about January 6th. They call them the J6 now.
Exactly.
Saying adopting much of the language from
exactly.
the African American experience
exactly.
in this country. They call them the J6.
Yeah.
And they have been punished the wrong way. And
so
it was just a picnic that they went through. Just some
right,
grandmothers on January 6th 4 years ago.
Exactly.
Yes,
well, I mean, once again, this is not likened to a time in American history that we thought that we had passed, and now we see the rhetoric is to return back to more imperialistic tendencies.
And we are definitely, truly moving in that direction. And, I'm reminded of the old blues song, Are You Going to Believe Your Lying Eyes?
Right, exactly, exactly.
Okay. Yes, and when we turn home and we look at, and can turn the conversation again, and we begin to look and see what's taking place here in Louisiana, we find now that there are some races which are important. In particular, here we look at the mayor's race, we look at the sheriff's races, and now we also have some individuals who are sharpening their political skills, and the mayor's race.
Well, once again,
yes,
the only person that has officially announced has been Councilperson Helena Morena. And, of course, we know she comes from the media, and really over the period of this whole terrorist incident, it appears as though they deferred to her almost as though she was the mayor. And so I think she curries favor with the mayor, and that she's come out, and I see that at every opportunity she's trying to sell herself as the de facto leader of the city.
And you see yourself, so you can see the steering that's taking place.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But as a professional, you see it. But individuals who the average citizen and voter sees this as well, because there are other candidates in the race which have not announced yet, but we know that very well will make this race, in my view, a very, very competitive race.
Yeah, Oliver Thomas has been mentioned. and as strong possibility he will be running. But in terms of this whole recent
Royce, yes.
incident, he hasn't garnered the coverage that that Helena Moreno has covered. And then, of course, you have Royce Duplessis,
Yes.
who has had a fairly successful time in the legislature as a state senator as a possible candidate. He has not announced, but and then of course Judge Arthur Hunter, who has a stellar reputation as being a judge to meet some of the needs of people who are impacted by the criminal justice system. So we have, at least four possibilities that's been named out there that you know that are likely to run for
Well,
mayor.
let me ask you this, and from your vantage point, do you believe that the terrorist attack has impacted the equation and changed the equation in terms of how we view the mayors this particular race?
Yeah, well, and from my estimation, the aim appears to be, once again, this was not a attack that we could have predicted, and of course, the attacks have been on Mayor Latoya Cantrell, and she is not running. She can't. She's not running for mayor. On the other hand, when I look at it from the perspective of the city, I look at both the mayor and the council, because the mayor, even though is responsible for administration, the council's responsibility is oversight. And the council has committees. They have a criminal justice committee. My question is, was the criminal justice committee sleeping on this last incident? Just so if you can point the finger at Mayor Cantrell, the other part of the governor apparatus, the city council, is their responsibility to make sure that the criminal justice piece is done as well. So you can point to, but in this particular case, it to me it's an incident that we have to learn from, and the finger pointing I don't think is going to be healthy. I think a larger question is whether the state is going to come in and try to superimpose its will, not just help, but go the way of, say, Jackson, Mississippi, and try to, in some ways or another, get the legislation to gain control of the VUCA in
Well,
other
in
places.
particular, the lieutenant, not to cut you off, but in particular, the lieutenant governor's office the lieutenant governor has always has demonstrated a desire to have control over the French Quarter.
Absolutely.
Because that's the gold mine.
And he was out of town, but first thing he came back and made comments saying, well, the city can't even do this right. Really, everyone is entitled to be critiqued, but at that particular time, it was necessary to show the face of unity, particularly in terms of making sure others who might have gotten uncomfortable about returning to the city, let them know that now everything is together. And I don't think the lieutenant governor did that either. I think he fell into the line with Steve Scalise and John Kennedy and others who were so busy trying to win points for the Republican Party and trying to win points for the incoming president.
Playing beltway politics.
Playing beltway at a time when we didn't need it.
Absolutely. And I like to commend the officials, the way they came together.
Absolutely.
The way they came together, and those are,
Governor Landry
yes.
complimented the entities and how well they done. But some of the others, like it says, Lee's Kennedy and the lieutenant governor, their comments were untimely.
And you and I are professors in the university systems, and we see individuals who come from outside the state all the time.
Absolutely.
to come and go to school, to live and to work. And we do want them to have a certain level of comfort and to feel comfortable in our city and
Absolutely.
also safe.
Absolutely.
We have 1 minute or so remaining, and I'd like for you to tell us what do you expect to take place over the next 30 days. What's important to you that we all should pay particular attention to over the course of the next 30 days? Yes, sir.
Well, I think absolutely the most important thing is recovering from this tragedy of the terrorist attack and to placing as priority every idea and every strategy that would prevent something like that from occurring again. That's to me is the top priority. And then we can look at the other things like the sheriff's race and the mayor's race. But right now, we're still healing from this disastrous event, and everyone should come together behind that.
Yes, and in my view, because of this, you may find candidates that may not come from government.
Absolutely.
That seems that may they may not be necessarily will win, but they may be
Uh-huh.
viable candidates which may come from outside of government, which tends to be the trend now.
Yeah.
And again, I want to thank you for joining me, Dr. George Amity. And again, this is Dr. Clark's One-on-One, the Living Classroom. You can follow me on every platform, all the platforms on social media, and we see you again next Wednesday. And as always, it's been a pleasure.